Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 1.
A couple in their late 30s, Daniel and Marcy, had just moved into a quiet neighborhood in Maine. They were newly married, both history buffs, and enjoyed hunting for old, forgotten treasures. So when they saw hand-painted signs for a yard sale, one day only, pointing down an isolated country road, they couldn't resist. The sale was at a rundown farmhouse surrounded by overgrown weeds and warped fencing. The lawn was scattered with dozens of odd items, mismatched dolls, Victorian furniture with deep gouges, broken clocks, and dozens of unmarked boxes. No one else was there. Just an elderly woman in a threadbare shawl sitting in a rocking chair, her eyes following them without a word. Marcy gravitated toward a small wooden chest, barely the size of a shoebox. It had no hinges, no lock, and was carved with symbols she didn't recognize, deep etchings that seemed far too precise for a simple trinket box. It gave her chills, but she couldn't look away. "How much for this?" she asked the woman. The woman slowly stood and whispered, "That doesn't belong to you." Marcy blinked, unsure if she heard correctly. "Sorry?" The woman's gaze didn't leave the box. "It remembers its last owner and the one before." Daniel chuckled nervously and handed the woman a $20 bill. "We'll take it. Thank you." She didn't touch the money. "Don't open it." Marcy, now visibly unsettled, tried to put the box back, but Daniel had already started walking away with it. The woman stared at them until their car disappeared down the road. Back home, the box sat on their kitchen counter. That night, while Daniel was asleep, Marcy found herself inexplicably drawn to it. She didn't remember walking to the kitchen. She didn't remember sitting down or turning on the dim overhead light. She just found herself staring at it, her hand already on the lid, and despite what the woman said, she opened it. Inside was nothing, or so she thought. Over the next few days, small things changed. Their dog, Baxter, refused to enter the kitchen. The lights flickered more often than usual. A cold spot settled in the corner where the box sat. Marcy began waking up at exactly 3:07 a.m. every night, drenched in sweat, hearing faint tapping somewhere inside the house. Daniel grew distant. He'd sit in their living room, staring at the box for hours without saying a word. Once, Marcy found him whispering to it, though he swore he was just thinking out loud. His eyes started to look hollow, disconnected. The last thing he said before he stopped speaking entirely was, "I think something came out." Marcy tried to throw the box away. She drove it to a nearby landfill and tossed it into a bin. That night, it was back on their kitchen table. It was open. She called the police after finding Daniel in the basement, carving the same symbols from the box into the wall. He didn't resist when they took him away. He never said a word. They put him in psychiatric care, but he never spoke again. He just scratched those symbols into the padded walls until his fingers bled. Marcy moved out a week later, but she didn't realize she had packed the box by accident, tucked inside a bag of clothes. Her new apartment was smaller, quieter. But on the first night, she woke at 3:07 a.m. to tapping behind the walls. Then came the whispers. And then something began knocking, not on the door but from inside the closet where the box now sat open again, waiting. She didn't open it this time. She didn't have to. It was already too late.
Story number 2.
A true yard sale horror story that still gets whispered about in a small Oklahoma town centers around a man named Lewis Granger, a retired mechanic who stumbled upon a strange sale while driving home from visiting his sister in the country. It wasn't advertised. There were no signs, just a cluster of items spread across a cracked driveway, almost like the sale had appeared out of nowhere. The house behind it looked abandoned. Curtains torn, windows dusty, the lawn overrun with knee-high grass. Lewis figured someone might be trying to get rid of old junk, maybe an estate sale for a deceased hoarder. He was curious, and curiosity has a price. The items were unlike anything he'd ever seen. Rows of taxidermy animals, but wrong. A fox with human teeth, a raccoon with extra eyes, rusted knives laid out on velvet cloth, each tagged with names instead of prices. Miriam, 1981. Clark, 1979. Unclaimed. He picked up a Polaroid camera with initials carved into the side, RTH. He asked the man behind the folding table, a tall figure in a black coat with deep creases in his face, how much? The man said, "It's free if you promise to use it today." Lewis laughed and agreed. Free's free, after all. That night, Lewis brought the camera home and tried it out in his garage. The first photo was of his workbench. When it developed, the photo showed the workbench, but with someone standing behind it, a figure in a long coat. Lewis spun around. No one was there. Thinking it was just a glitch or an old exposure stuck in the film, he snapped another photo, this time of his empty hallway. In the picture, the hallway wasn't empty. A hand, pale and thin, gripped the edge of the door frame. Again, Lewis saw no one when he checked. Things escalated. Every photo he took showed that figure getting closer. First behind furniture, then just outside windows, then inside the room. Always still, always watching. He threw the camera in the trash, but it was back on his kitchen table the next morning. He tried burning it. It didn't burn. He drowned it in the lake. He found it on his nightstand, dry as bone. He stopped sleeping. He saw things move in mirrors, heard breathing when the house was silent. Sometimes the sound of a Polaroid flash echoed in the dark, though no light came. Then, one night, Lewis vanished. Neighbors found his front door wide open, lights on, dinner cold on the stove. The only thing left was the camera, sitting on the couch, a new photo slowly developing. It showed the inside of the living room, the couch, the table, the front door. But also something else, someone standing at the window, looking out, their face pressed against the glass. It was Lewis, but his eyes were gone. Black pits stared out from the photo, mouth wide open like he was screaming, but there was no sound. The police kept the camera as evidence. It disappeared from their evidence room within a week. Years later, a couple browsing a flea market in Missouri claimed they bought an old Polaroid camera with RTH carved into the side. They said the man who sold it to them didn't ask for money. He just told them, "It's free if you use it today."
Story number 3.
In the fall of 1996, in a quiet suburb outside Portland, a single mother named Teresa found herself driving past a community yard sale set up along an old cul-de-sac. She wasn't planning to stop. Her toddler, Jamie, was napping in the back seat, but something about a table near the edge of the sale made her slow down. There was an antique baby monitor sitting on the corner of the table. The seller, a gaunt middle-aged man in a threadbare flannel shirt, told her it was a rare model from the 1950s. "They don't make them like this anymore," he said, and gave it to her for $1. That night, she plugged in the receiver in her bedroom and set the transmitter near Jamie's crib. The sound quality was grainy, but it worked. At 2:13 a.m., Teresa shot awake. Static hummed from the baby monitor. Then came soft breathing. She smiled groggily, assuming it was Jamie. But as she sat up, she noticed the breathing didn't sound like her son. It was deeper, slower, rhythmic, like an adult. Then a voice, barely a whisper, came through. "Don't get up, he's watching." She froze, her heart hammered. She ripped the covers off and rushed into Jamie's room. He was asleep, alone. Everything looked normal, except the transmitter was off, unplugged. Still, the voice had come through clearly. She didn't sleep the rest of the night. In the morning, she threw the monitor in the trash. That night, she heard it again. Even unplugged, the receiver in her bedroom hissed to life. Breathing, then footsteps, then laughter, faint and distant, like it was coming from another room in the house. She unplugged the receiver and tossed it outside. In the morning, it was back on her nightstand. Over the next few days, the messages became more specific. "He likes your boy's room," it said. "Or did you see what he drew on the wall?" Jamie had begun drawing things she didn't understand. Stick figures with holes for faces, scribbled over with red crayon again and again. Then Jamie started talking to someone who wasn't there. When she asked who, he said, "The man in the wires." Teresa called an electrician, a priest, even a paranormal group from a nearby college. No one could explain how the unplugged monitor kept working. No one could figure out where the voice was coming from. One night, she set up a camcorder in Jamie's room, aiming it at his crib. At 2:13 a.m., the monitor in her room crackled on. "Come see," the voice whispered. She watched the video the next morning. At first, nothing. Jamie stirred in his sleep. Then something flickered into view. Tall, thin, pale skin stretched over impossible limbs. It hovered near the crib, arms twitching like it didn't know how to use them. Then it turned and looked directly into the camera. That was the last frame before the footage cut to static. Teresa and Jamie left that house the same day. The camera, the monitor, she left it all behind, moved 2 states away. But a few weeks later, a package arrived at her new apartment, no return address. Inside, wrapped in newspaper, was the same antique baby monitor. It was already on, and someone was breathing through it.
Story number 4.
In the summer of 2004, a high school teacher named Eric Matheson was visiting his hometown in rural Pennsylvania when he stumbled across a strange yard sale on the edge of a wooded property. He hadn't planned to stop. He was just out for a drive. But the display caught his eye. Not because it was impressive, but because every item on the tables was pitch black. Black tools, black books, even black dishware, spray painted or naturally darkened over time, he wasn't sure. An old man with milky eyes sat in a lawn chair under a large umbrella. He didn't speak, didn't even look at Eric, just gestured toward the items. Eric found himself drawn to one thing in particular, an old framed mirror, the glass so aged and foggy that it barely reflected anything. What little image it did show seemed off, not quite in sync with reality. The man didn't say a word when Eric bought it for $5. He simply nodded once, slowly. Back in his apartment, Eric hung the mirror in his hallway above a small side table. But after a few days, he noticed something strange. His reflection in the mirror didn't always move when he did. Sometimes it lagged, just by a second or two. Sometimes it wasn't smiling when he smiled. And once, after brushing his teeth, he glanced at it and saw himself still brushing, head bowed, mouth foaming, like the reflection hadn't caught up, or didn't want to. He began catching glimpses of things in the mirror that weren't in the hallway. Faint shadows moving behind his reflection. A shape, tall and thin, standing just outside the edge of the glass. If he turned around, the hallway was empty. It wasn't just the mirror anymore. He started hearing tapping sounds at night, always 3 slow taps, always from the hallway. The hallway light would flicker, then surge with brightness before dimming again. One night, he covered the mirror with a bedsheet. The next morning, the sheet was on the floor, and written into the condensation on the mirror's glass were the words, "You looked first." Eric took the mirror down and stored it in his closet. That night, he woke up to find his closet door wide open. The mirror was leaning against the frame, uncovered, facing the bed, and his reflection was standing beside the bed, looking down at him. He didn't sleep after that. Didn't stay in the apartment either. He returned to the yard sale the next week, desperate to return the mirror, but the house was gone. Not just empty, gone. Where the property had been was now an overgrown patch of woods, no sign a house had ever been there. Eric left the mirror in a field behind an abandoned gas station and moved across the country. He didn't tell anyone why, but 2 months later, he got a package in the mail. No name, no postage, just a torn scrap of cardboard, and inside, the same mirror cracked down the middle. His reflection no longer copied him at all. It just stood there now, smiling,